Madam Speaker, 5 billion rupees. 5 billion rupees, this is what has been reported in the press as being the amount which the State Trading Corporation will have to pay to Betamax following the arbitration award. 5 billion rupees. How many houses can we build with 5 billion rupees? The budget of the Honourable Minister of Housing, 5 years budget for construction. We can eradicate the problem of social housing for 5 years with 5 billion rupees. 5 billion rupees, we can complete most of the project that has been announced for key community-based project in the budget. $5 billion, we can do roads, we can do drains. $5 billion, we can eradicate absolute poverty for a while. And yet, not a single word in this budget about the Betamax saga. Not a single word about who will be paying for that money. Not a single word about how will this money be paid. Honourable Minister Mentor commented on Betamax. Let me remind him that only one party in this country stood against the contract of Betamax when it was signed in 2009. Only the MMM did. In those days, the MSM was doing what they call opposition loyale. That was before they joined hands with Narendra Modi in 2010 election. And we, at the MMM, criticized the Betamax contract, not because we have anything against the people behind Betamax, not because we have anything against Betonix, but we were not agreeable in the way that we were going to bind this population for the next 15 years, a contract that was signed in total opacity without any tender procedures being followed. And of course, in 2010, as a responsible opposition, we asked a PNQ. The Honourable Leader of Opposition asked a PNQ about the Betamax contract. And the government replied. They set out a series of reasons to justify the decision to give the contract to Betamax. And they concluded, and I will quote this, "We in this country have a lot of businessmen, many cousins, cousines. They never invested 2 billion rupees. It is the first time in Mauritius that a Mauritian is going to invest, and we already have a contract, Mr. Speaker, sir. The contract was awarded after STC was exempted. The STC was exempted from the Public Procurement Act, and I think, cut the sarcasm, and I think as a lawyer, the honourable member should know. Who was saying that? Was it Dr. Ramgoolam? Was it Honourable Bechu? Was it Honourable Jita? No, that was Honourable Shawkat Sudan saying that. Honourable Shawkat Sudan defending Betamax and teaching lawyers a lesson, telling lawyers that you should know that Betamax is exempt, that STC is exempt from procurement procedures. But these days, the MSM was with Labour Party, honeymoon period, when Mr. Mentor was President of the Republic, so that was fine. Only the MMM, don't change history, only the MMM objected to the contract with Betamax. And I was not happy with the answer, Madam Speaker. So 1 year later, I asked the same Minister, Sudan, did you seek the opinion of State Law Office? This is what I said. May I know from the Honourable Minister whether the final form of the contract that was signed was cleared, vetted, and approved by the State Law Office? And that is what Honourable Sudan said. In fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the advice of the State Law Office was that the agreement is legally in order. That is what was said in this August Assembly. Before the government, before the STC signed the contract with Betamax, they took advice for State Law Office. And State Law Office told them that it was legally in order. But then, what happened after this government took office? Cabinet decision of the 30th January 2015. Cabinet has taken note that the contract of affreightment regarding the transportation of petroleum products from Mauritius, signed between the State Trading Corporation and Betamax, is being terminated forthwith in the light of, inter alia, the unlawful procedure and processes regarding the allocation of the contract. Same MSM party, when they were with Labour Party, defended Betamax, answered PQs and PNQs, stated that they had received all proper legal advice from the State Law Office. And once they were in government, back in government, they rescinded the contract. So the Honourable Prime Minister today has a duty to this nation. He has to tell the nation, did the government, did STC go back to State Law Office and get a legal advice before they rescinded the contract with Betamax? Because when Honourable Fowler asked the same question to Honourable Ganga last year, the Honourable Minister refused to answer this. He hid behind the arbitration proceedings. He said, I can't diverge. There is an arbitration going on. I can't diverge. So we ought to know today in this August House, did the government, did State Trading Corporation take legal advice from the State Law Office before they decided to terminate the agreement with Betamax? Madam Speaker, now we have an award. Now we have an award for 5 billion rupees. The Honourable Minister Sina Tambou has announced on the radio in the press conference that the State Trading Corporation will apply to the Supreme Court to set aside the arbitration award. That's the right that they have, and they should use it if they feel that there is legal ground to set it aside. They should do it. But then the Honourable Minister, who is a lawyer, he knows about the New York Convention. He knows about the Convention on Recognition and Enforcement of Arbitral Award that we have signed and ratified and promulgated in Mauritius. He knows about all these decisions of the Supreme Court of Mauritius, including the landmark case of Cruz City, where the Supreme Court stated in what exceptional circumstances you can set aside an arbitral award. But let's assume that this arbitral award is not set aside. Who is going to pay for it? How is it going to be paid? There's not even a contingent liability. Under contingency, there's not even a provision made. And we're not talking about potential award. It's an actual award. So the very least we would have expected from this government, if they were responsible, is to include, to make provision for contingency in case the arbitration is not set aside. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, Betamax is not an isolated case. La façon de ce gouvernement s'est comporté après les élections, on dirait, on croirait, un éléphant dans un magasin de porcelaine qui crase tout sur son passage. Et le peuple aujourd'hui doit ramasser les pots cassés. We have city power. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister is not here. We in the MMM objected to the way the former government gave the contract to City Power. We objected, again, not because we had anything against City Power, the promoters behind City Power. We objected because the way the contract was awarded, the opacity surrounding the award, the fact that it was an unsolicited bid. That is why we agreed. We objected. But what did this government do? Instead of renegotiating with City Power, instead of ensuring that the procedures are followed, they rescinded the contract. They terminated the contract with City Power. And the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Ivan Kolendavelou, who is not here, has been criticized. The CB has been criticized by the Supreme Court for the way they treated City Power, because City Power won their judicial review. The case is before the Privy Council. The case is on appeal. But the lawyer for City Power has already made it known that City Power will come after the state for damages. And when it does so, what would happen? Who will pay for that? Mr. Kolendabelu, the government. And again, no contingency, nothing planned, not a single word about this possibility in the budget. And City Power is not they're not the only one. What about Hogan Lovells? Their claim for 400 million rupees in relation to termination of contract for Point Jérôme. What about the numerous cases, which the numerous people who have been arrested, only to find that their provincial charges were struck out? All these numerous people are suing the state in millions of rupees. What will happen to the claim of people like Ish Sukan, like Randia Singh Binik, like Honorable Shakil Mohammed, like the family, the Rawat family? What would happen if these people were able to establish their claim against the state? No provision at all had been made, no contingency plan at all. And we all know that there's a big arbitration going on where Daoud Rawat is suing the government for $1 billion US. $1 billion US. Again, we have to provide for these things. Gouverner, c'est prévoir. And this is why last year, the then honorable leader of the opposition asked a PNQ to the Prime Minister, who was then Minister of Finance. He wanted to know whether provision is being made in case all these cases are successful against the state. But the Honorable Minister of Finance then didn't find fit to answer. C'était le cadet de ses soucis. C'est le cadet de ses soucis l'année dernière, ça l'est toujours cette année. Madam Speaker, since we are on the issue of BAI, I mean, it's very sad. I'm very sad that there's not a word about the policyholder in Super Cashback Gold and Brahma Asset Management. Answering to a PNQ earlier this year, Honorable Sisankar, Minister of Financial Services, confirmed that there are about 5,000 policyholders who have not yet been paid, and the amount that had to be paid to these people is around 9 billion rupees. This is what he said, this is in Hansard. Around 9 billion rupees left to be paid to the policyholders. And we know that most of the assets of BAI have been sold. We know that most of these assets have been sold for peanuts, bradé. We know what happened to courts, not sold to the highest bidder. We know what happened to Iframa. He lost all the concessions. We know what happened to Apollo Hospital, with our question here. And we know what happened to BAI Kenya, which was supposed to be sold for 4 billion and was actually sold for only 2.1 billion. And here I pose to comment, there is a commission of inquiry set up to look into the BAI Kenya. And who is heading this? Sattar Haji Abdullah. And we all heard the tape recording that is circulating in the internet about the conversation between Sattar Haji Abdullah and his boss. Yet nothing, up to now, nothing. Not a single word about this tape, about why Mr. Sattar Haji Abdullah was sent to Paris, why he was asked to negotiate with Daoud Rawat, what was the deal. Nothing, not a word up to now. And the Honorable Minister Mentor goes around and talk about BAI. Yes, the leader of opposition, Paul Béranger, we questioned the government about BAI. Yes, we were concerned. We were concerned that the investment, the insurance levels, the related party ratios were not being addressed correctly. And yes, Honorable Xavier Duval, who was then leader in the government, defended Bec et Ongle. He was Minister of Finance. He defended Bec et Ongle BAI, just like Honorable Sudan defended Bec et Ongle Betamax. But what happened after the change in government? We should not forget. We should not forget who removed the money from Brahma Bank. We should not forget the rundown on Brahma Bank. We should not forget how many parastatal bodies removed their money from the Brahma Bank. We should not forget that Brahma Bank, the central bank, had given them time to find money. And on the same day that they were given a letter telling them that they have a delay to find the money, on the same night, I should say, their banking license was revoked, late at night. So don't come and say BAI is not your making. BAI was a problem, but this government destroyed it. BAI was a problem that could have been tackled and resolved in a different way. But this government chose to gun down BAI, and today thousands of people, 5,000 people, are still left with 9 billion rupees not paid. And people has gone on strike. People has gone on strike in Port Louis. People has gone on strike. Video Cooperative Trust and Saving Society has gone on strike. Why did these people stop their strike? Because they had meeting with the Honorable Prime Minister. What did the Honorable Prime Minister tell them? I hope he will be able to tell us in his summing up, because I spoke to the representatives of these people, and what he told me is very different from what I just heard from the Honorable Minister Mentor. What he told me was that the Honorable Prime Minister told them that he was going to go to India and talk and see if he can get financing from India. And then when he will come back, he will say he will find a solution to pay them in one go. That is what at least they understood. If they misunderstood, at least the Honorable Prime Minister should have told them, you know, I'm not taking any commitments. Maybe they would have continued their strike. But at least today, as a caring government, the Honorable Prime Minister has told them that he's working on a solution. You've given them hope. Don't let them down. Because a lot of these people, they are victims, innocent victims. They were taken, they invested in BAI. The FSC had licensed these products. So today we should not come and say, these investors, they ought to have known better. It is the FSC who ought to have known better before allowing the public to invest. And the FSC is the government. We are the one, the government is the one who appoints board members of the FSC. The government has a minister responsible for FSC. So we can't just say that it is the people who've lost their money who has themselves to be blamed. Madam Speaker, I would like to move to the budget itself. The budget, Madam Speaker, is a very important exercise. Every year, a lot of time and resource is put in the preparation of the budget. Consultations are held. Ministries send their recommendations. There's consultation with stakeholders, members from the public, trade unionists, private sector. And then the Honorable Minister of Finance come and tell this House what he wants to do, how he will do it, and what objective he's going to attain by doing it. So how he's going to spend money, how he's going to get money to spend, and what result will come out of the spending. And we debate till late at night. We spend long hours in committee stages. It's a very serious exercise. And then after 1 year, the Honourable Minister should have the decency to come and tell us what I have told you that I will do, why I didn't do. If I had told you that I'm going to spend on such and such thing, I have to tell you why I didn't spend. If I told you that I'm going to achieve this economic performance and I don't achieve it, I have to have the decency to come and explain why I got it wrong. Maybe there are a reasonable excuse. Maybe it's just sheer incompetence. But at least we need to know why you missed the target. The Honourable Minister Mentor has been going on about the growth. Let me remind him, the Honourable Minister of Finance, his first Honourable Minister of Finance, Honourable Lakshmi Naidu, for last year, he had predicted a growth rate of 5.7%. 5.7% he had predicted. Last year, the Honourable Minister of Finance had predicted 4.1%. This year, he has confirmed that we only received 3.9. That's below 5.1. And that's a third below 5.7%. So there's an underperformance. And I agree with the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. I have doubts. I'm not going to challenge the figures prepared by the Minister of Finance, but it is a truth that other independent economists and the World Bank has predicted a lower growth, has advanced a lower growth figure than 3.9. But now that we know what the growth has been, we should not stay here. We should understand why. Why have the government underachieved? And we should look at the capital budget. The capital budget, Madam Speaker, is the amount of money that we spend on goods that is going to generate growth, as opposed to recurrent expenses who comes every year. For capital, it is usually a one-off over a period of time, and it will supposed to stimulate the economy and bring growth. Last year, it was announced that the capital expenditure would be 10 billion rupees.
Would you give way 2 minutes? Madam Speaker, I have a point of order. The Honourable give way 2 minutes. Minister Menta shockingly said that I had misled the House because I had referred to BIE having surplus reserves. I'm tabling a copy of the report of BIE Motors Company Limited, year ended 31st December 2013. And you should not say things you do not know. And it shows clearly 6 billion rupees. No, I want to say, Madam Speaker, because you have allowed him to defame me. I will say there was 6 billion rupees.
Opposition, please, no, I'm just asking, no. Honourable Leader of Opposition. No, Honourable Thierry Henry, I'm just asking you not to address yourself to the Minister, but to address yourself to the Chair.
Again, I am submitting proof. A audit firm called KPMG. That may be so. That may be so. Then I was, Madam Speaker, I answered the question at that time, and this is 2013, so I would ask Honourable Prime Minister Mento, now that I provided the information, to kindly excuse himself, present his excuse.
You are laying a copy of the document on the table of the Assembly. The document will be examined by the Honourable Minister Mento, and then he will situate whether he will withdraw or not.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was just saying, before being interrupted, that last year the Honourable Minister of Finance had budgeted 10 billion rupees for capital expenditure. But the figures that he has, what is in the estimate, shows that far from 10 billion, only 6.7 billion rupees, the actual amount spent for last year in the capital budget was not 10 billion as he had planned, but only 6.7 billion rupees. We are talking about almost a third, 1/3, 33% underspending. And it is normal that if a government does not spend on capital spending, he's not going to achieve growth. And in fact, in the budget estimate themselves have already conceded that they will not be achieving the growth. And I'm not saying it for myself. This is what is stated in the estimate at page 7. If we look at the growth for next year, it is estimated at 4.1, 2017-18. Last year, for the same period, it was not 4.1. It was predicted that we're going to have 4.6% growth. Then for 2018-2019, this budget anticipates a growth of 4.3%. Last year, in his budget, for the same period, 2018-19, the Honourable Minister of Finance anticipated 5% growth. So already, 1 year to the other, this government has themselves had to bring down the ambition of their growth, what they anticipate the growth would be. And it's no surprise, because if you don't spend on capital, you won't get growth. Now let's turn to public debt. Public debt, Madam Speaker, is the amount of debt as a percentage of GDP. In 2015, Honorable Lakshmi Naraidu used the term alarming level when he was describing that our debt level in 2014 was 61% of GDP. Alarming level. Yet, from 61%, his budget increased the debt level to 65%. The public debt to 65% last year. This is what Honorable the Minister of Finance just stated. And now, for this year, so when it was 65% last year, the Honorable Minister of Finance came and said 65%, I'm going to reduce it to 62.8%. So this is what we were told. This is what the budget we voted last year, to reduce public debt to 62.8%. And was public debt reduced? We've just been told on Thursday, public debt has now reached 66.1%. Now, if 61% was alarming, what will the government describe 66.1% public debt as? And I could understand if this public debt had been used to invest in capital project, in capital expenditure. At least I would have hoped that this money is being used to produce growth, future growth. But no, I have just mentioned, we are underspending our capital budget. Now, Madam Speaker, if someone earns 10,000 rupees a month, and 66% of that salary, 6,600 rupees, goes into paying his debt, what will he do? Will he borrow more? Or will he work harder? He would work harder, wait till he has more money, and then spend. But this simple, basic economic logic seems to be beyond the grasp of this government. So we have debt level at already 66.1%, and we are told that we are now getting more borrowing from India. And in order to fool people, to try to fool the IMF, we're going to say, no, it's not public debt. It is redeemable preference shares. Redeemable preference shares, as if the IMF will not look at substance over form. The problem, Madam Speaker, is that this is unsustainable. This is bad fiscal stewardship. Madam Speaker, we cannot live off other people's money. We cannot and should not burden the population. We cannot and should not mortgage our children's future. Après moi le déluge. This is what it comes to mind after I heard what the Honourable Minister of Finance said about the debt level and taking more debt. Après moi le déluge. The move to amend the Public Debt Management Act to use gross debt instead of net debt is a welcome step. But tell the truth, you're not doing it because you want to please IMF. You're doing it because there is a legal requirement in our law, in this act, that by June 2018, you have to reduce public debt to 50%. And this government has not been able to do it, will not be able to do it, so they're going to amend the law to just move the post. Just move the post. Inflation. Both the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister Mentor mentioned inflation at 1%. I'm a bit at a loss because when I look at the estimates which has been circulated at page 7, I see inflation rate percentage, 2016, 2017, 2.2%, 2017, 2018, 3%. So it's not 1%, it's 3%. Again, I would have preferred the Honourable Minister to explain what he meant just by throwing a figure of 1% and not comparing it to like figures. But what we have now is a system of low growth and rising inflation. This is a recipe for economic disaster. Unemployment Unemployment, only one line in the budget, talking about the unemployment rate has fallen to 7.3%. We would recall in 2015, Honorable Lakshmi Naidu spoke about creation of thousands of jobs. In his Vision 2030, the then Prime Minister spoke about creation of 100,000 new direct and indirect jobs. In last year's budget, Honorable Pravin Jagnnath was even more precise at paragraph 49 and 50 of his speech. The new policies to boost up economic growth and employment in this budget will generate 7,000 new jobs in the short term. 21,400 youth, men and women, will be taken out of unemployment. Now the facts. The Honourable Minister Mento challenged the figures advanced by the Leader of Opposition. But the Leader of Opposition is not wrong, Madam Speaker. He's been relying on what I have been relying, which is Statistics Mauritius, which published its report in May 2017. In May 2017, what did Statistics Mauritius say? It stated that in 2015, there were 538,300 employed people. And in 2016, there were 538,600 people in employment. So from one year to the other, he's right, there has been only a net increase of 300. There's only 300 more people who are in employment compared to last year. But it is true that employment rate has gone down. It is true that it has gone down from 7.9% to 7.3%. But it is not going down because you're creating more jobs. It is going down because the people looking for jobs has gone down. The active labor force has gone down. Economically inactive has gone up by 10,800 people. Labor force has gone down by 3,600, which is logical because we are an aging population. So a lot of people will not want to work. Last year they were looking for a job, today they're retiring. A lot of people have moved overseas. A lot of people are in training. But the net amount, the reason why unemployment rate is going down is not because you're creating more jobs. It is because the labor supply is shrinking. The facts remain that almost 24% of people below the age of 24 are unemployed. Madam Speaker, on Friday, the day after the Honourable Minister of Finance presented his budget, a girl came looking for a job in our chambers. He has been on the register stamping cards, as they say it, for the past 4 years and haven't got a job. She hasn't got a job, and I was looking at her and I was thinking, what is there in this budget to encourage the private sector to recruit this young girl? A young girl with no experience, a graduate with no experience. YEP will absorb a number of people for 1 year. After 1 year, they will go back. But there's absolutely nothing. And we did not need to have a lot of imagination. We could just see what other countries are doing to solve the unemployment problem among the youth. We could have, for example, introduced a fiscal incentive and told companies that for the first year, if you recruit a young graduate, a young unemployed graduate, we will allow you a double deduction for the salary for the first year. At least they would have an incentive. But no measures, absolutely no measures announced in this budget to solve the unemployment problems among the youth, among the graduates of this country. Next economic indicator, budget deficit. In layman's terms, this is a difference between what you expect to earn and what you plan to spend. Now, obviously, if you are earning a certain amount of money, if you're earning 10,000 rupees, you're not going to spend 11 or 12,000 rupees because you will have to take a loan to finance this excess. So budget deficit is very important. The amount of money that we spend compared to our revenue is very crucial. And in this year's budget, the Honourable Prime Minister stated that the overall budget deficit will be 15.5 billion rupees, representing 3.2% of GDP compared to 3.5%. Now, is this really the case? Are we really going to have only 3.2% budget deficit. If we look at the table, Madam Speaker, at the estimate, table 8, we see that revenue would be 99.5 billion. Expenditure, both current and capital, will amount to 127 billion. So 127 billion minus 99 billion, my friend Honorable Patna can help me, would be around 28.2 billion rupees. 28.2 billion rupees. This is the real budget deficit, 28.2 billion rupees, not 15.5 billion rupees. And 28.2 billion rupees represent a shocking 5.8% of GDP. Now, of course, if we take into consideration the exceptional grant from foreign governments and institutions, the deficit goes down to 21.2%, which still represents 4.4% of GDP, not 3.2. Why has he been able to reduce, or at least pretend that he's reducing the budget deficit? Is because he's transferring funds from the two special funds to the budget. But you can't do that. What you're doing is not reducing the budget deficit. What you're doing is financing the budget deficit. It's as if, I have 10,000 rupees a month, I want to spend 11,000 rupees, I take 1,000 rupees from my savings account. That doesn't mean that I'm spending less than 11,000 rupees. It simply means that I'm financing my excess spending by using my savings account. This is what the special funds are. These are accumulated money sitting there. What we're doing is we're using this to finance our budget. So it is really, Madam Speaker, very disappointing that the Honourable Minister of Finance will come before this House and pretend that the budget deficit will only be 3.2 billion, 3.2% of GDP, when we know that the actual deficit would be 4.4%. And we know that we won't have these special funds next year. We know that we won't get the same help from India or China or Japan or Australia, because they also have helped us donating money for this budget. We're not going to always get money for them. We can't run our budget based on money which other people will give us. This is unsustainable, Madam Speaker. This is irresponsible. Madam Speaker, I spent a considerable time on economic indicators because this is how we judge our economy. This is how we judge our economy, not by what we hear on the street, not by what we have people on radio go and talk about, not about what we pleasure to the ears because someone had 10 cents on a bread. No. Economic indicators is where we can gauge the soundness of our country. Economic indicators is what the IMF will use to rate Mauritius. Economic indicators is what standard rating agencies such as Moody's, Standard & Poor's are going to rate Mauritius. And I have demonstrated, Madam Speaker, that the economic situation is far, far from being the rosy picture which the Honourable Minister of Finance tried to paint. And this is why all respected economists unanimously agreed that this budget is not addressing the fundamentals. I would like to make a few brief comments, Madam Speaker, on a few sectoral measures announced in the budget. The first one is the SME sector. The SME, Madam Speaker, has every reasons to be disappointed with this budget. You will recall, Madam Speaker, in his budget 2015, Honourable Lakshmi Naidu spoke about Île Maurice Nation d'entrepreneurs. He described it as the most ambitious goal of this government, making the SME sector the backbone of the economy. And he was right. He was right. The SME sector should be the backbone of the economy. He then went on to announce the creation of an SME bank. He announced that he is going to put 10 billion rupees over 5 years to this SME bank, 2 billion every year. He announced a comprehensive one-stop shop for the SME, housed in Sikkim Tower. He announced major fiscal incentive for SMEs. And last year, the Honourable Minister of Finance announced even more fiscal measures. 2 years later, where are we? Where are we today? There is no SME bank. The money which was supposed, the 10 billion, the 2 billion every year, which was supposed to be used to help SME, has been used to help Mobank. The money has been injected in Mobank. And how much Mobank has disbursed? How much money has Mobank given to the SME sector? 2 billion? 5 billion? 1 billion? Answering to a PQ on 11th of April, asked the Honourable Minister Bola, how much money has Mobank disbursed since last year? His answer was only 71.2 million disbursed. Only 71 million rupees disbursed to the SME. When the Honourable Minister of Finance, Honourable Lakshmi Naidu, had announced 10 billion. After 2.5 years, we should have at least 5 billion. Only 71 million. And only 42 SME development scheme certificate. And they were talking about making SME the backbone of the economy. The backbone of the economy with only 71 million rupees. And now, what are they announcing in this budget? What are they announcing to make this SME again become the backbone of our economy? Billions of rupees? No, Madam Speaker. Only 100 million, and also over 3 years. 100 million over 3 years for the implementation of the 10-year master plan for the SME sector. And also, one of the landmarks, there will be a new SMEDA. A new SMEDA will be replaced by SME Mauritius. So the SMEDA that has, which was supposed to be a one-stop shop set up by Honourable Lakshmi Naidu, is going to be replaced by another entity now called SME Mauritius. But what's in the name? What's in the name? You're just changing names. You're just changing institution. You're not going to the fundamentals. The fundamentals is we have people in this country that needs financial assistance to grow. We have an SME who are in dire need of finance. They have good ideas. They have good products, but they don't have the money. They don't have the money because they don't have the collateral to put to get the money. And the government must, once and for all, start trusting these people. They should start trusting our SME. They should start going and backing our SME sector. Manufacturing sector. What happened to the measures announced last year? I hope the Honourable Minister, the Prime Minister in his summing up will tell us what happened to the mobile oil refinery in Albion. What happened to the gold business? What happened to the pharmaceutical parks? What happened to the Indian delegation who was supposed to open several manufacturing projects, including the production of bicycle and motorcycle? What happened to all these projects that was announced last year? Madam Speaker, the hard fact is, according to Bank of Mauritius, today there is more money going out of Mauritius to invest in factories outside of Mauritius than money coming in Mauritius. Hundreds of millions of rupees are being used to invest in factories in Bangladesh, in other countries, instead of investors coming into Mauritius. So, Madam Speaker, we are very far from the Vision 2030 announced by the then Honourable Prime Minister, where he had a dream to increase the share of manufacturing from 18% to 25% of GDP. I have to admit, the government decision to come with the 3% tax for companies involved in the export sector, it's a welcome step. It's a welcome decision. In the past, in the 80s, we used to have EPZ who had complete tax holidays, zero tax. But will we today get the same result as we had in the 80s? Will we, using the same policies, attract the same people? No. Why? Because investors today prefer to invest elsewhere. Because the other countries are not sleeping on their laurels. They are competing with us. They are giving facilities, they are giving incentives, they are competing for investment. And this is no surprise, because Mauritius, we have gone down in doing business indicated by the World Bank. Moving on to the finance service. Madam Speaker, the FSC is in a crisis like never before. Never before. 4 directors resigned in a space of a week, including the Solicitor General. 4 directors, and we don't know why. The FSC has not deemed it fit to issue a communiqué to explain the reason of their resignation. The Honourable Minister has not commented on the reason for their resignation. And this has given rise to all kinds of speculation. And this is tarnishing our image as a financial jurisdiction. The truth of the matter, Madam Speaker, is that under this government, the FSC has gone from worst to worst. From worst to worst. We had in the past strong FSC board, headed by people of the caliber of Anil Tajadar, who was former deputy of the Bank of Mauritius. The FSC have had strong CEOs like Iqbal Rajab Ali, like Hilton McCain. But today, what do we see? A CEO who is only acting, whose contract is renewed on a monthly basis. And the board, who is the chairperson of the FSC, the financial secretary, with obvious conflict of interest because he's also a member of the board of companies that are regulated by the FSC. He's a member of listed companies that are regulated by the FSC. He's a member of investment committees that are regulated by the FSC. How can you be judge and party? How can you be sitting as chairperson of the FSC and also as a board member of companies which are regulated by the FSC? The FSC has totally mishandled the BAI saga. There's a strong perception of political interference from the highest sphere of the state in the Alvaro Sobrino saga. And although his licenses were suspended, this gentleman was still allowed by the FSC to acquire all the shares of a management company, Tyson Corporate Services. He's still the owner of Tyson's Corporate Services. He's still the owner of a management company. His license has not been suspended. He can still go around getting people to invest in Mauritius through his management company. We've also had the New Mauritius Hotel saga, where earlier this year, in February, the FSC issued a communiqué telling us that, they've been monitoring the situation for the past 1 year. Everything has been done perfectly well. All the listing rules have been observed, only to backtrack when they receive a formal notice suing them, threatening to sue them. Then what they do? They appoint an investigation. The investigator investigate, question people, come up with a report. Up to now, the FSC has not deemed it fit to publish the report. Why? What is the credibility of the FSC today? What is the credibility of the Stock Exchange of Mauritius today after the New Mauritius Hotel saga? And all this is happening, Madam Speaker, at the time where the sector is facing numerous challenges. We all know the impact which the revision of our treaty with India has on the offshore sector. And we don't even have the full extent of the effect. We'll have to wait for the next 2 years. But there is even greater challenge ahead, far greater than the renegotiated double taxation treaty with India. That is the OECD initiative in base erosion profit shifting. Basically, what the OECD is saying is, you low-tax countries, you are preventing us, developed economies, from getting taxed. Our companies are not paying us tax because they're using you as vehicle not to pay tax. So we, OECD, we're going to put pressure on you, small islands like Mauritius Financial Center. You'll have to adopt minimum standards. And the European Union has come back and said, if you don't follow these standards, we, the European Union, will put you on a blacklist. So forget about funding from the European Union. So now Mauritius was forced to sign the multilateral instruments. And the multilateral instrument basically say that it will override all the treaty, double taxation treaty. And the OECD, the European Union, has already identified 2 weaknesses in our taxation system. The first one, the global business companies that are being taxed at only 3% compared to normal companies who are taxed at 15%. And the second one, the global business 2 companies which are tax exempt. And yet nothing, we didn't hear anything about what the government is going to do to address this challenge, except that the Honourable Prime Minister has announced that there will be a blueprint. It's as if la mort, la tisane après la mort. Now they are going to come with a blueprint because now they don't know what to do. They have no clue how they're going to address the challenges. And yet, gouverner, c'est prévoir. One illustration of the amateurish way in which this sector has been handled is in respect of the Financial Services Promotion Agency. 2015, the agency was under the Board of Investment. This government comes, create a new agency. Rightly so. You have a new agency dedicated for financial services. Today, 2 years later, the same government, what are we telling? We're going backward. We're doing a U-turn. Now the FSPA will be under, instead of BOI, under this new entity which they call the Economic Development Board. And what a waste of time and money. What will happen to all this stuff? What will happen to all this? We spend a lot of money to do the Financial Services Promotion Agency, take it away from Board of Investment. Now we're going back to Economic Development Board. Madam Speaker, there is one measure which we are very concerned on this side of the House, and this is the setting up of the Investment Authority. The Honourable Prime Minister was very economical about what this National Investment Authority would do, what its composition would be. He only mentioned that it would be used to invest locally and globally the surface funds of NPF and NSF, which amount to some 130 billion rupees. We on this side of the House are very concerned about this investment authority because when he mentions NF, NSF, NPF, these are public's funds. These are the pensioners' money. And the pensioners' money have to be invested in a very conservative way. And this is why we have an investment committee, an independent investment committee. There are rules, there are guidelines. Now we're taking it away from this investment committee. We're going to give it to this investment authority. What will the investment authority do? And we all know how this government tried to twist the arm of SICOM and NPF to tell them to invest in National Insurance Corporation. So is it not a backdoor way of now ensuring that they're going to invest people's money, pensioners' money, in National Insurance Company? So this is why we think that it is very dangerous, and we'll wait for clarification. Madam Speaker, the last thing I would like to talk about is the measures for eradication of poverty. This has been hailed as an historical measure. The Honourable Prime Minister stated that, and I quote, I am pleased to report that more than 8,000 families are now benefiting from subsistence allowance. More than 8,000 people. Answering to a PQ earlier this year, to a PNQ earlier this year, Honourable Wong stated, indeed, there are 8,214 families. These are families with a threshold of 9,520 rupees a month. So today, around 8,000 families are benefiting from this subsistence allowance. But how was it last year? We've had social register since 2012. Since 2012, people on the social register get some sort of social allowance. The children get school materials. This is used for, and they get contribution from National Empowerment Foundation. They get social housing. So it's not a new idea. We've already had social registers since 2012. When last year the Honourable Leader of Opposition asked the then Minister of Social Integration, how many people were on that register? The answer was that the threshold was 6,200. Now it is 9,000. It was 6,200. So when the threshold was 6,200, there were 13,267 households in Mauritius, and 1,400 households in Rodrigue registered. So in other words, before the historic measure announced by this government, by the Honourable Prime Minister last year, 13,267 families was receiving some sort of allowance from the government. They were on the social register. Today, after this historical measure, instead of 13,000, we have only 8,000 families. This is how we are eradicating absolute poverty, by giving less money to less people. 8,000 today, that's almost 40%. 40% less families today are receiving subsistence allowance than previously, less than 40%. And we know, Madam Speaker, that there are thousands of poor families who are not on the register. The Honourable Mr. Wong himself stated that 14,462 families applied to be on the register, but they were found to be ineligible. 14,462 families excluded from the register. Is this how this government intends to tackle and eradicate absolute poverty? Many families in my own constituencies, Madam Speaker, are living in abject poverty, in subhuman conditions, and yet they are not on the social register. And not for want of trying. They have gone there. But each time they go, they ask for new documents. They ask for, as if, these people don't want you to have a number, too many people on the social register. Madam Speaker, the theme of this year's budget is rising to the challenge of our ambition. What is the government's stated ambition? In paragraph 11, that is what the Honourable Prime Minister said. Our aim is for Mauritius to be a high-income country by 2023, with an income per capita of around $13,600 against the current level of $9,740. So this is the ambition, to make Mauritius by 2023 a high-income country with per capita 13,600. A few years ago, the same Honourable Prime Minister, when he was then the Minister of Finance under the Labour government, under the leadership of Ramgoolam, he told us about his dream. It was his first budget, November 2010. I remember very well because it was the first time I was participating in a budget. And I remember very well what he said. He said, as we rebalance growth, we must also make a great leap forward on productivity in order to propel the economy on a modern development path. A path to emerging opportunities, to a GDP of 1 trillion rupees by 2020s, and to an income per capita of USD $20,000 and higher. This is the Mauritian dream. In 2011, the Mauritian dream, the dream of the then Minister of Finance, was to make Mauritius a country with 1 trillion rupee of GDP, with per capita income of $20,000. Today, the same Prime Minister, his dream is no longer to make us have $20,000 per capita, but only $13,600. And with this budget, he will not even be able to live up to this promise. A budget which is neither creative nor bold. And if this is the best budget which this government can come up with, Madam Speaker, I'm afraid that their best is simply not good enough. L'île Maurice mérite mieux que ça. Merci.